Welcome back to BookCast FM, bringing books to life, one cast at a time. There are some books in business. They get cited all the time, but maybe not always fully grasped. Kenichi Ohmae, The Mind of the Strategist from '82 is definitely one of those. A real masterpiece. Yeah, when it came out, it wasn't just another theory. It felt like a direct challenge, didn't it, to those very rigid analytical ways of thinking, especially in Western companies. So our goal today, our mission, is to really cut through some of that noise and get to the heart of Ohmae's big idea, which is strategy isn't a checklist. It's not mechanical. It's about, well, strategic thinking, being creative, intuitive, really challenging the assumptions everyone else just accepts. We want to find those strategic gaps, the ones that lead to real market impact, not just playing the same game as everyone else, those kind of Me Too strategies that just end up costing a fortune. And hey, if this discussion sparks something for you, if you want the full picture, please do support the author. Grab a copy of the book. We put the link in the description, like always. Okay, so let's dive in. To get this strategic mindset, first, we need to understand the playing field. And for Ohmae, that starts with his famous strategic triangle, the three C's.
Exactly. And the key thing here, I think, is that it's not static. It's not just a diagram. Ohmae saw it as this field of dynamic tension. Strategy is all about managing the pull between three core forces: the customer, the competitor, and the corporation itself. You're constantly adjusting, balancing these tensions.
And the big warning is you ignore one and the whole thing kind of collapses, right?
Precisely. Yeah. Like, if you're only focused on your own company's efficiency, making things internally great, but you completely miss a big shift in what customers actually want, you could become irrelevant fast. Or, flip side, say you're obsessed with delighting the customer, but you ignore a competitor who's just found a way to slash costs. Well, you're going to get undercut. Simple as that. The whole system has to work together. It's a triangle, and optimizing one corner often means, making a trade-off somewhere else. So let's break them down. C1, the customer. Ohmae says this is the starting point, the absolute driver. Strategy has to begin with a really deep, almost obsessive understanding of what customers value, how they perceive things, and the big mistake, treating them all the same, like one big group. Ohmae really stresses segmentation. Actually, he calls it ruthless segmentation.
That's interesting. Ruthless segmentation, because it kind of pushes against that modern idea of, trying to capture the entire market, isn't focusing hard on a niche a bit risky, leaving potential customers on the table?
Well, it sounds risky, maybe, but Ohmae argues it's critical. It's a bit like the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. Focus on that crucial 20% of customers who drive 80% of your profit. Or maybe the segment that gives you the best strategic foothold for future growth. You just can't afford to be everything to everyone equally well. It dilutes your efforts. So by picking a key segment and really prioritizing it, you simplify everything. Your resource allocation becomes sharper, you maximize your impact. And if you understand what drives that segment's choices better than anyone else, you've basically won the strategic game before your competitors even know what hit them.
Okay, that makes sense. Which leads us nicely to C2. The competition. So if the customer tells you where the fight is, the competitor dictates how you fight it. But Ohmae's point isn't just beat the competition, is it? It's more subtle.
Much more subtle. It's about changing the terms of the fight, outflanking them. See, traditional strategy often ends up in these head-to-head battles. Feature versus feature, price versus price, usually right where your competitor is strongest. Ohmae says that's just a recipe for a costly stalemate. Mediocrity, really. Instead, you need to find their weaknesses, their blind spots, maybe assumptions they hold about the market that just aren't true anymore, and you exploit those. The classic case study everyone uses is Honda entering the US. Tiny company back then. They couldn't possibly take on GM or Ford directly with big cars, right? Their dealer networks were massive. So what did they do? They came in with small, fuel-efficient motorbikes first, then small cars. They basically created a whole new space where the big guys couldn't really compete effectively because their whole structure, their costs, everything was geared towards big, profitable cars. Honda just sidestepped them, redefined success for a whole decade. That's outflanking. Pure Ohmae.
Perfect example. And that flows right into the third C, the corporation. So customer and competitor shape the strategy, but C3 is about looking inward, hard. What are we actually capable of doing?
Yeah, and this is often the toughest part, that internal, honest look. A strategist needs a really clear, unflinching view of the company's real core strengths. Where do we genuinely have an edge? And, just as vital, where don't we? It's not just about the balance sheet. It's about skills, culture, capabilities, the stuff that's harder to measure. Ohmae put it brilliantly, didn't he? He said something like, strategy is the art of making choices.
Choices about what to do and, more importantly, what not to do. Yeah, I remember that.
Exactly. That what not to do part is huge. If a company can't say no, if it lacks the discipline to ditch things that don't align with its core strengths, or if it spreads its resources too thin, chasing every little opportunity, it's just going to be mediocre. Resource allocation has to be almost surgical. You need courage to funnel resources only where they'll have the biggest impact, even if that means killing off beloved old products or divisions.
That decision, that courage to say no, feels like the perfect bridge. We've understood the landscape with the 3 Cs. Now, how do we actually secure a strong position? Ohmae didn't just leave it at philosophy. He laid out these 4 specific paths, didn't he? 4 routes to strategic advantage.
That's right. These are the how-to. They turn the strategic thinking into actual competitive action.
Okay, let's tackle route 1. Concentration on key factors. Sounds like it's all about focus. Once you know your customer segment and your strengths, how do you apply that power?
You zero in on the key success factors, the KSFs. Now, a KSF isn't just anything that's important. It's one of maybe 2 or 3 critical things, the leverage points, that really determine who wins or loses in your specific industry. Could be anything, really. Distribution networks, tech leadership, maybe quality control, brand image. Depends on the industry. The trick is to identify them accurately and then pour basically all your energy and resources into being outstanding, selectively excellent in just those areas. Think about Toyota again. They weren't chasing fancy designs or luxury features, not initially. They focused relentlessly on manufacturing quality and reliability. There was a huge KSF in the global auto market back then. And they had the discipline to say no to stuff that distracted from that core, built a massive global advantage on basically that one thing. Selective excellence, Omi called it. Beats being generally okay at everything, every single time.
That discipline seems key. Okay, route 2. Exploiting relative superiority. This sounds important for companies that aren't, the 800-pound gorilla in the market. You don't need to be best at everything.
Exactly right. Strategy isn't about being equal everywhere. It's about leverage. Even if you only have a small edge in one area, maybe operationally, maybe technically, if you leverage it smartly, you can create a really big win. The idea is to take that area where you're just slightly better and magnify it. Make it the thing that becomes decisive for the customer. Look at Sony back in the 70s. They weren't bigger than, say, RCA. But they did have this edge in miniaturization technology, a relative superiority. So they leveraged that. Not to build bigger, better home stereos to compete directly. No, they created the Walkman, a whole new category based on that small strength. Competitors couldn't easily follow because they were stuck thinking big. Sony turned a small difference into a huge strategic win. Brilliant.
Yeah, the Walkman is such a great example, which moves us neatly into route 3, which feels related. Aggressive initiatives. This sounds like being bold, proactive, forcing competitors to react to you. But isn't there a danger there? Doesn't aggressive sometimes just mean reckless in business? How do you know the difference? Where does Ohmae draw that line?
The line is drawn by the 3 Cs again. The initiative can't just be a wild gamble. It has to be calculated. It needs to align with your actual corporate strengths, that's C3, and be aimed at a well-defined customer segment, C1. It needs solid grounding. Aggressive strategies, when done right, can win the psychological battle. You create a new market, like with the Walkman launch, and dominate it before anyone else can really react. You change the rules, you put competitors on the back foot, playing catch-up. But, and this is the key, if that bold move requires resources or skills your company genuinely doesn't have, then yes, it crosses into recklessness. It violates that crucial self-awareness of C3.
Got it. Calculated boldness, not just boldness for its own sake. Okay, finally, route 4. Strategic degrees of freedom. This one sounds the most creative, maybe abstract, escaping the normal rules of competition altogether.
It really is the pinnacle of strategic thinking, I think, because it forces you to challenge your own assumptions, deeply held ones. The strategist has to constantly ask, what constraints are we just accepting as fixed? Are they really fixed? Like, if everyone in your industry assumes you have to sell through traditional retail, well, why? Challenge it. If everyone thinks the product is only for a certain demographic, could you redefine the user, change the whole game? Nintendo is a fantastic example here. Think about the Wii. Sony and Microsoft were locked in this escalating war over raw processing power, graphics, a very specific KSF in their view of the console wars. Nintendo just stepped sideways. They created strategic freedom by changing the whole basis of competition. With the Wii, and later the Switch too, they focused on unique gameplay, accessibility, experience. They deliberately avoided the expensive hardware race. They redefined their customer, focused on fun over specs, used creativity to escape a constraint, the need for bleeding-edge power that their rivals thought was absolute.
That's fascinating. And it really brings us to the core, doesn't it? Because all these choices, understanding the three C's, picking one of the four routes, it all hinges on the mind of the strategist. Keeps coming back to this. Strategy is primarily a way of thinking.
That's absolutely his core message, the real legacy of the book, I think.
Right.
And it's the part that often gets missed when people just focus on the frameworks. The strategist's most vital skill, according to Ohmae, simplification. It's the ability to cut through all the noise, the complexity, the data overload, and isolate the two or three things that genuinely matter, the essential variables. By simplifying the problem, the strategist makes it possible for the whole organization to actually take clear, decisive action. Remember that other quote? The most important role of the strategist is not solving problems, but defining them correctly.
Right, because how you define it dictates everything that follows.
Exactly. If you define the problem as, say, we need to boost sales next quarter, what do you get? Tactics, short-term fixes. But if you define it as the fundamental way we deliver value to our best customers is being disrupted by digital, wow, okay, that leads to a strategic revolution, potentially.
So the analysis, the data, that's maybe the science part. But the simplification, the intuition to see the real problem, the leap, that's the art. And if you rely too much on just the mechanical analysis, you just end up tweaking things.
Yeah.
Staying safe within the old rules.
That's the danger. You get incremental improvements, maybe. Mediocre results. Because true breakthroughs often require challenging those very rules the analysis is based on. The art is blending that rigorous analysis with creative intuition. It requires curiosity, always asking why. It needs laser-like focus to execute on those KSFs we talked about. And, maybe most importantly, it needs courage. The guts to make tough choices when things aren't certain. Those qualities, adaptability, creativity, focus, courage, that's what turns a dry report into a strategy that actually changes the game. And the ultimate test always is, does it work? In the real world. Not how elegant it looks on a PowerPoint slide. Great strategies often look blindingly simple, but only after the strategist has done the incredibly hard work of stripping away all the clutter and confusion.
That feels like a perfect place to sort of synthesize things. We've journeyed through Ohmae's world, understanding the deep tensions of the three C's, finding the courage to pursue one of the four roads, and realizing it all comes down to that mental discipline, simplification, focus, the mind itself. So maybe here's a thought to leave you with, inspired by Ohmae. Take a look at your own world, your business, your career, your team. If you could just discard one big prevailing assumption, one sacred cow that everyone in your field just accepts as true, the thing that limits your strategic degrees of freedom, which one would it be? And if you could discard it, what new path might open up for you? Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Kenichi Ohmae's truly essential work. We hope it gave you a bit of a strategic edge. This has been BookCast FM, bringing books to life one cast at a time. Remember, the link to purchase The Mind of the Strategist is in the description if you want to explore further and support the author. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.